Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, the Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books, I welcome you to a virtual evening with prize-winning author Rosalind Brackenberry on her newest book, Without Her, a story of female friendship, loyalty, and past selves, published by Delphinium. Following the disappearance of her lifelong friend Hannah, Claudia travels from the US to France to aid her husband and children in their search, and is confronted by old jealousy and a former French lover who may play a part in the mystery. An urgent picture of life's wake in Hannah's absence, Publishers Weekly remarked, Brackenbury reaches into the heart of a long, complicated friendship, and the result is a skilled combination of a missing person mystery and a sentimental reminiscence. Rosalind Brackenberry is an English novelist and poet who has lived in Key West, Florida for 25 years. She's the author of Becoming George Sand, Paris Still Life, The Third Swimmer, and The Lost Love Letters of Henry Fournier. She has appeared at the Key West Literary Seminar, both as moderator and panelist, has taught poetry and fiction workshops at the studios of Key West, and was twice writer-in-residence at the College of William and Mary. Rosalind is joined in conversation by a dear friend of Books and Books, Diana Abu-Jaber, whose most recent work, Silver World, is a fantasy with an Arab-American girl at its heart. Diana often writes about the intersection of food, family, and cultural identity. Her memoir, Life Without a Recipe, was described by Ruth Reichel as bold and luscious. The Language of Baklava, her first memoir, was published in many languages. Her latest novel, Birds of Paradise, won the Arab American National Book Award. Her other novels include Origin, Crescent, and Arabian Jazz. Fencing with a King, a novel of Middle Eastern intrigue and suspense, is forthcoming from Norton in 2022. Diana teaches at Portland State University and lives in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Throughout this evening's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions. So please ask questions by clicking on the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. They'll be taking questions right after the conversation. You can purchase Without Her and any of Diana's books or any books you might want at the Books and Books below by pressing the green button. Every purchase you make supports Books and Books during these very difficult times. So now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the stage. Hello.
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 Hi.
Hi. Hi, Diana.
Hey, Roz.
Hey, it's good to see you.
It's great to be here. I'm so excited to be able to talk about your work. And I just want to say a few things before I turn it over. Roz is going to read to us, so that's going to be a real treat. I just want to say that I'm a longtime admirer of Roz's work. I've read, I think, at least 5 of your novels. But I know you've got, do you have 12 books?
Yeah, some of them are sort of hard to get. They came out a long time ago, but yes.
Okay. Yeah, you're prolific, and you work in several genres, which I think is very exciting and unique. You know, you're not limited to fiction. You've worked as a journalist, you write poetry. And that's one of the things I love about your writing, is that your work has real breadth and scope. And I was thinking about how an editor once complained to me that she felt that a lot of writers, well, she was actually talking about women, and maybe we should bring this up at some point.
Yes.
She said she felt that a lot of women writers write small, that they write domestic dramas, that they write about emotions and the family, which I guess is small. I don't know. And that she longed for big, luscious books. And I feel like your books have that kind of that scope, that range. You bring in politics, you bring in culture, you bring in history, as well as the psychological and painting a portrait of our time. And that I find enormously exciting. So I just want to say that I feel like this book in particular, your latest one, is very Brackenberry. I feel like it really has your stamp on it, and it's a marvelous thing to read a book that has a clear, original, distinctive voice. That is something that I long for in writing, and I see that so much in your work. Yes, thank you. So.
Well, yeah, thank you for saying all those good, nice things. And I'm very glad you see some breadth in my work. But I also want to say, on behalf of people who write small and domestic, that's where we live.
Right?
And when men do it, they don't get told they're being too small.
No, right? How does that work? Yeah.
But that was great. Thank you. Yeah.
And I think you're going to read to us. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
I'll read a piece from this book, which is about, as Christina was saying, women's friendship. But I think there's a moment in women's friendship, and this happens when Hannah and Claudia, who are the two girls who are becoming women, and they've met a French boy on a train. They're all just students, and he erupts into their lives and is sort of a catalyst for the rest of their lives, actually. They're knowing each other in different ways. And they've just met Alexandra on the train going south. They're very excited to be leaving England, as we all were when we were young, and going south through France to Italy on a night train. And this piece I thought I'd read is just after that, when they're actually in Italy, and they're in Uffizi in France, and we meet Alexandra again. And we were talking a little bit earlier about clothes in fiction and how clothes can make you feel in real life, good or not. Anyway, this refers to that a little bit. It's when the cat is set among the pigeons, if you like, because Alexandra's the third thing, in their relationship that's going to change everything. We next saw him gazing at Botticelli in the Uffizi, his arm around a girl who was gazing at him. Hannah, Claudia, this is Lucia. It all sounded very properly Italian. Lucia, languidly disentangling, was a slim girl with dense black hair and eyebrows that very nearly met in the middle, and a seductive downward look. She wore a straight brown shift to the knee, like a linen sack, really, but incredibly chic and correct. And she moved like Monica Vitti, stepping her way through Italian realist debris. We've both seen all the films that Antonioni had made so far, Hannah and I, so we recognized the blueprint. We stood there gaping and irritated at once. Two English girls with bad complexions in our rumpled cotton dresses and cardigans and our unchic sandals, all wrong. We'd lost Alexandra to a better model of girl, and there was nothing we could do about it. At the youth hostel, we ate spaghetti with no meat in the sauce every night because it was cheaper, and danced with other foreign boys under the moon, and went at 11 to our segregated beds. The moon stared in at us through a bare window, and we lay awake, whispering, not daring to talk out loud, and dreamed our separate dreams. In Florence, we plodded around the Uffizi, took photographs of the David in the square, drank cappuccino in cafes, learned how to eat spaghetti, and lost weight with all our conscientious touristy striding. Alexandra, well, there he was again, right at the end of our stay, and he'd obviously not been doing anything as banal as staying in a youth hostel. He looked sleek, in a pink button-down cotton shirt and black jeans, his jacket slung across one shoulder. He looked Italian. He waved across the tracks to us. Come to Paris. What? Can't hear you. I said, come to Paris. I'll be there in a few days. I'll give you my address. Then he was suddenly there beside us, having run up the stairs and across the bridge that separated the two platforms and arrived at our sides. We all kissed, two each, bumping cheekbones in our haste. He scribbled on a bent postcard he'd pulled from his pocket, the Botticelli ladies with the shell. Come in a few days. I'll be there. That's my phone number. Call you. And Lucia? Oh, she was an old friend. Nothing serious. Over now. Good to meet up again, but we didn't know. We had no idea how French boys and Italian girls conducted their affairs. No. So, Lucia was over. He shrugged. I have an aunt in Rome. Why don't you come to Rome? Ah, zut, there is my train. And he bounded away, and 3 steps at a time up the stairs and back across the bridge and down the other side. And we couldn't see him as he leapt into the Rome train, and then, presumably, it was gone. I had his postcard in my hand and shoved it into my shoulder bag. What a poser, said Hannah. I remember my surprise.
Is he a poser? I don't think he's a poser.
Yes, but she wouldn't want Claudia to know that she fancied him. She wanted to just say, no, I don't like him.
Throwing her off the scent.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. She's a tricky one.
It's a tricky one, yes. It was interesting to write her, yes.
Yeah, I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you came to write this book. Was there an incident or a particular story or a particular idea that kind of brought you to writing this book?
Well, not a particular incident really, but I'd been wanting to write sometime about my awful boarding school in England.
Yeah.
And then I'll have 2 girls who meet there and who suffer through, their tough time and become lifelong friends. Because I think when you've been in a difficult situation with somebody early on, you cut each other a lot of slack. Actually, you're very supportive, and so Hannah is actually quite mean to Claudia a lot of the time and very unreliable. But Claudia keeps forgiving her because she's her oldest friend. And that was one thing. And then another thing was the question of what would it be like if somebody disappeared? Now it's quite hard to do when we're so tracked and examined everywhere and so much surveillance. And what would it be like if somebody disappeared in her late 60s? Why would she do that?
Yeah.
And so I put these 2 things together, and I must admit that for the longest time I had no idea where she'd gone.
Really?
Going, yes.
Interesting.
Yes. Alarming to arrive in the middle of the book and thinking, I actually don't know where she is.
Oh, how interesting. I wondered if you knew ahead of time or if...
And then it evolved, yeah.
Okay. It kind of revealed itself as you wrote.
Yes, thank goodness, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so intrigued that you reference Antonioni's L'Avventura, and that was something that really intrigued me. I mean, at one point, Claudia, who teaches film, she says that her students, they don't really want questions, they want stories. And I wondered, do you feel that way? Do you feel like, do great stories need endings? I mean, in the sense of closure, do great stories require answers?
It's a very interesting question, actually, because yes, I was very much fascinated by the Italian films in the 60s. Can you hear me? I've got an echo here.
I'm not hearing it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Rosalind, if you have any tabs open on your computer, close them. If you have any additional tabs open on your computer, you should close them, because I do hear an echo.
Okay, that's fine. Better. Okay, thanks. I forgot about that. Anyway, it's still there, something.
He's still there?
Yeah. I don't think I've got anything else open. Let's see if this. I hope I don't want to lose you all.
Right.
Like, you sound all right. I think that's all right. Where was I? Yes, the stories without endings. That when I was a student, which is the same age as these guys in the early 60s, there was a sort of fashion, there was a moment in which you accepted the fact that there wasn't an ending and that you weren't going to be told what happened. And it seemed very sophisticated to me at the time, if a bit baffling,
Yeah.
and you kind of accepted that that was the way that things were when you were not a child anymore, you were the unknown. And so Claudia, at the beginning of the book, is teaching this film where you never know what happens to the person who disappears in Aventura. And her students are infuriated. They just want to know, what happened? You can't just do this. And I think there was a moment when you could, and it seems to me now that in books and films, it's become much more literal. People actually want endings, and they want to know what happened. And there's that sort of era of things being a little bit vague and undecided in the end. It has gone, has passed. I don't know what you think, but it was an interesting time because it was like okay, we're going to tell you a story, but we're not going to tell. We don't know what happened.
That's right.
And there are many movies like that, particularly French and Italian, and you just end up. That's it. That's the end. No,
that's it. Yeah, that L'Avventura is one of those films that I found poignantly painful to not know, and yet it has haunted me. It has stayed with me in a way that so many other films dissolve away.
Oh yes, that's what happens, because you go back and you think, well, what did happen? And it stays in your mind. I mean, this is what, 50 years, a long time ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And similarly, books that don't have an explanation. I remember reading a detective story once. It was, I think, by John Fowles, and he started out with a detective story, and in the end, the detective just falls in love with somebody, and you never know what happened in the crime, and you just kind of, well, forget that. We're going this, and there's a wonderful freedom about it for a writer.
Yes.
That kind of thing. It's very stays with you, as you say. Yeah.
I was really anxious when I was reading your book because the mystery is so foregrounded. It's so it's suspenseful. It pulls you in. It is all immersing, and I was really wondering if you were going to solve it for us. And I don't think that's a spoiler to say that you do give some answers. And I wondered, did you consider not solving the mystery?
Yes, actually, I did. And then I thought, no, I think I've got to, I've got to solve it.
Okay.
I could have done an Antonioni type ending, but I don't think in 2015, I mean, 16, last year, I don't think it would have been very satisfying to people. It seems like we've changed our ideas a little bit. And, so I set myself the challenge of finding out what did happen. And then the story of what actually happened fell into my lap while I was writing a book.
Aha. Interesting. How did it come to you?
Well, through something that had happened to somebody I knew and who was telling me about it. And then I said, well, actually, would you mind if I used this in my novel? And she said, no. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was a gift. It was a gift. Yeah.
The ending of this book is so satisfying. And I remember marveling at it as I read it, because I thought, as I was waiting for the mystery to resolve, I was thinking, she can't resolve this. There's no way that this is going to have a satisfying. The question is too painful. There's too much at stake. There's too much betrayal, but you did it. So yeah, it's.
And sometimes things come into you sort of from left field, don't they? Or somebody just gives you the bit you need, which is wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be open to it. Yeah. You have to be willing to let those kinds of experiences in, and I think you have to be kind of awake to the possibilities, as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Which we hope we're in that state. Actually, this present moment is quite good for that, because so much else isn't going on. I do find that.
Right.
have plenty of time to think about, whatever I'm working on. I don't know about you, but life is stressful, but not stressful at the same time.
Weird, isn't it? Yeah. I wondered if you could maybe talk about that a little, about your writing habits, and if you feel like they've changed at all or have been impacted in any significant way.
Well, I think as writers, we're very lucky, actually, because we mostly spend time alone in our rooms anyway. You know, if you're in the theatre, it's deeply frustrating at the moment. I have friends who just can't do what they usually do, or symphony orchestra. I don't know, but for writers, well, yes, in theory, it's ideal. I have to admit that for the first few months, I sort of thrashed around feeling stuck and angry and all the rest of it, and then. But I've sort of settled down lately to having what I find very helpful is to have a really rather rigid routine in which I go to my studio every morning. I used not to be able to do this when I was younger, and I had children and I had everything else that was going on. So I just remind myself of those times and think this is actually extraordinarily lucky, fortunately, to do this. So I sort of firmed up that commitment, because otherwise I was just sort of all over the place and thinking, well, what do we do now? Cancelled lots of plane trips.
Right.
So yes,
you're able to settle in and to write and to be creative.
Yeah. I don't know what's going to come of it, but it's like
Are you writing every day?
I am, yes. I'm going into the room with it. I mean, Annie Dillard said this nice thing about, you probably know it, where she said you have to take a chair and a whip with you and go in and face this book. The book is actually quite, purring. It doesn't need to be tamed every single morning. But if I'm not going to say you have to go in and get in the room with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely the whip. I think that's. I often forget my whip, so that's
You're a little vulnerable then.
Yes, right. Yeah. Come here, little creativity. Are you working on anything new?
Yes, I am. I'm doing. I started writing a memoir, actually, which is now put on one side, and I'm now doing a little fiction. And so I'm not going to say too much about either, because they're both really new, and I'm not, quite slightly embryonic. So
okay.
Yeah, new
All
stuff.
Right.
Yes.
You said something earlier that has kind of stayed with me, and I've thought about it a lot with your book, and I think some of your other books kind of touch on some of these issues too, about what we write about and the kinds of questions or ideas that haunt us. And I was really interested that in so many ways, Without Her is about friendship and friendship between women.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that Virginia Woolf said something about how there were so few satisfying portrayals of a friendship between women in literature that it almost wasn't it wasn't valued sufficiently. And I wondered if that was something that was of particular interest to you as a writer.
Well, it certainly was. And when I came to write this book, I don't know that I've written about it. I have actually written about it before. I have, about this kind of ambiguity in young friendships anyway, when it comes to meeting a man. Can you go on trusting this person, or are they kind of steal him behind my back? That kind of competitiveness. I've never written about groups of women. I was thinking about this the other day as I was reading a novel in which there's a group of women, because I've not had that experience. I've always had one close friend, in my life, but though I know lots of people. But I think it's true. It's underestimated.
Yeah.
And sort of so dazzled by the whole thing about writing love stories or about, the big themes, that you can sort of almost overlook it. But I think it's such an important thing in women's lives. I mean, really, it's so vital.
Yeah. I think there's something called the Bechdel Test, which the graphic novelist Alison Bechdel talks about how you look for a scene in which two women get together and have a discussion that is not specifically about men. And how rare it is to find a book or a movie or a work of art that does not have a male, at the center of it somehow.
Yeah. I think actually that's really shifting, particularly with younger filmmakers and writers, that almost a bit old-fashioned to have to talk about a man all the time.
Right? Yes. Yeah.
Seems all sort of out of date, because it's not, we don't do that endlessly anyway in real life, I don't think. Or maybe it's just I've got older. But as if the male figure's got to be the linchpin.
Yeah.
And in Without Her, he's important, Alexander, but I don't think I make him central, really. Although he affects them both. And they
but great swaths of the book are about their friendship, and their history and the escapes they make and the adventures they have, and even the question of a potential betrayal or abandonment are, in some way they're about men, but it's what I find so interesting about the book is it's so much about what's between these two women. And the electricity and the tension and the power that can come about with a really important friendship, how a great friendship can be just as poignant and just as moving, just as literary and worthy as any other.
Yes. Exactly. And so we have been sort of a little bit bent out of shape over many decades, I think, and I don't know when I was younger whether women sort of valued friendship as much as we do now. It was like we can going out to dinner with a woman friend is probably the nicest thing you can possibly do, and you sit and talk for hours, and it's lovely. You'd probably rather be doing it than going out with a man, But
right. No offense, guys. No offense.
Sure. I mean, but it's as good. Yeah. And I think when I was sort of a teenager, that nobody really admitted that. The great thing to do was to, maybe when everyone's a teenager, they feel that. I don't know, but I do think there's been a major shift in valuing our relationships with other women.
Yes.
And not sexual ones, just friendships.
Exactly. Well, I think
without it being a sexual involvement, and also I think the thing about the people in this book, Claudia and Hannah, is that they've been through a lot together. You have a very particular relationship with somebody with whom you suffered a lot and put up with stuff, and they are very homesick and they're very, not well treated at their school, really. I think about Jane Eyre. It's not as bad as Jane Eyre's school, but died actually.
Right.
But it was pretty oppressive, and in that situation, you really kind of team up with somebody to survive, I think.
Yeah, I can really see that. I want to ask about the boarding school actually, but I know we need to leave some time for questions also. So maybe we should invite questions. If people would like to ask a question, please do so. And I'll let's see. We need to check to see if there are any questions. And we'll see if anybody comes in with a question for us. I don't think I see one yet. But I feel like the presence of the boarding school is a very big shadow that lays upon the book. There's a real a darkness to that boarding school that almost underlines everything. In a sense, almost the way a post-traumatic experience could play out in someone's life. And I don't think I mean, you see it shown in sometimes in more of a cliched manner where, you know, it's the school marm and it's the nuns with the rulers and this kind of thing. Yours is more subtly done, but it's chilling. It's absolutely chilling. And I was thinking that's really a very big part of your book, isn't it? That shared history.
Shared history that keeps coming back. They are at college together too, but that's a totally different experience. And
Yes.
they've been when they were 11 and 12. They meet when they're that age, which is a very sensitive time for girls, I think. You know, and you have to go through puberty without anybody really helping you or telling you what you're doing, what's happening. You rely on each other. Nobody knows. You know, nobody is really looking out for you at all. So yeah, I think it forms their relationship and it makes them tough and independent in a way, which I think boarding school does. You know, you suddenly realize you're on your own at that age. It's young. It's a very young time to be out in the world without anybody really apparently caring about you. But underneath, they're pretty vulnerable. So I think it forms their characters.
Yeah.
In different ways, because Claudia is determined to make film, and she strikes out on her own and goes to America and learns filmmaking on the West Coast. And it's an adventurous life, really, and rather risky. And Hannah decides that she's going to get married, and she marries her college sweetheart, and settles down in England and has children. So they, in a sense, they've done very different things with this experience.
Yeah, they both, in a way, they respond to it, and in certain ways, surprising because your feeling about Claudia is that she is a bit conservative. She has a sense of right and wrong. She is able to be loyal. She's able to be truthful. But Hannah, on the other hand, is a little bit more loose about things, about her way in the world. She has a kind of flexibility, shall we say, about things that sometimes can hurt people. And I think it's interesting that she becomes the one who has the more traditional or conservative. She takes, at least ostensibly, the more traditional conservative path.
Yes, and then you know, but also goes on sort of skating around inside it in a way, being quite secret. And you know, her habit of letting people down. I mean, I think that occurred to me that she, when she disappears, it's what she's been doing all her life. Actually, she's been scooting off and not telling people where she is. It's just that this time she's really gone. You know, and she's the age of to be a grandmother, and people think, well, you know, people that age don't just run away. Something terrible must have happened to her.
Yes, yeah. And it's so interesting that, you know, you ask the question about what are women allowed to do? You know, how audacious are we allowed to be? I think that is kind of an amazing question, and it's about how we're allowed to take on certain roles or certain, you know, surprises in our life, especially women, especially mothers.
Yes. Yeah. There's still a very firm idea people have of how mothers are supposed to be, you know that.
Yes, absolutely. And
they're supposed to behave like mothers, you know, and they're also ordinary people. They're real people.
That's right.
So Claudia isn't a mother. She's decided she's never going to marry, but she has this long affair with Alexandra, who lives in France while she lives in America. So they only manage to meet infrequently, once or twice a year by arrangement. But they keep their love affair sort of alive by the fact that they're always just meeting and parting. And Hannah's completely different. She finds the safety in this man who is extraordinarily, I think, generous to her husband, who has loved her since the beginning and really forgives her everything, even in the end when she's doing something that she perfectly, really disapproves of.
So amazing. It's amazing. I
did actually like the men in this book. Yeah, and I thought very sweet and you know, unpretentious and husband and very faithful.
Yeah, they're decent guys, mensches.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask a question about marriage, but you do have a question here that maybe we should take. I don't want to run out of time. Someone is asking, can you speak to some of the influences in your work?
Other, you mean? Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, I started out being completely bowled over by Virginia Woolf and wanting to be her, as many of us did, and trying to be her for many years. I get influenced by a lot of people. I'm often influenced by just what I'm reading at the time. I am still stunned by Michael Ondaatje's work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
wonderful.
It really impressed me so much when it first came out.
Do you think more Americans or more, like, is there a certain nationality or culture that you are drawn to? Do you tend to read more English?
Now, I don't know if it seems awful to say I can't think of an American writer. I like Susan Minot's book Evening is absolutely wonderful.
Yes.
And I like French writing. I was very influenced by Marguerite Duras.
Wonderful.
And wonderful writer. And she sort of kept me busy for years trying to find out how she did it, So a mixture of things. I do think there's some amazing Canadians, though. They seem to have a real lead in fiction in some ways.
Oh, Alice Munro to me is the goddess.
Yeah. I can never think. I mean, I'll probably, when this is over, I'll think of lots of other people. But that gives you
right. I know. I'm the same. I'm panic, deer in the headlights.
Like when you go into a library and you can't think what you came for. Look at all these books and you think, I know I wanted something.
Yeah, right. Which is why you should go to the library.
Ours is now closed, unfortunately.
I know.
Spending a lot of money at Books and Books in Key West.
Yes, that's right. Come to Books and Books. Buy books.
Buy books. I do. I mean, I just think this is like buying groceries. I have to have books, so I'm just going to buy them. And they're very great about delivering them too.
Yes, absolutely they are. Okay, we have more questions. What's next for women? That's an interesting question. What is next for women? We can take over the world?
Well, I'm very hopeful that we might one day have I hardly dare to say it in case it gets jinxed, but we'll have very much the world.
Oh!
I look at these countries that are run by women and look how well they're doing mostly with controlling the virus. I think it's not a coincidence, I don't think.
Right.
I think we're getting into our strength. That's what I like.
Yeah. I agree. We're
getting there.
Yeah. We're coming into it, definitely.
It's amazing. Yeah.
No, I agree. Let's see. What is next for both of you? What are you exploring? Okay.
Would you like to that one first?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm like you. I get nervous about saying too much about something that's too embryonic. I have a new book coming out, but it won't be out forever. It's the weirdest thing. I feel like the publishers these days, they're trying to tiptoe away from the pandemic. They're trying to broadcast out to some future when people will be flooding bookstores and shopping.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and hopefully that won't be too far away. But yeah, so that will be out in 2022, winter 2022.
It'll come fast. Yep.
Yeah, it'll come. It'll come. Yeah. But yeah, I've got something new I'm sort of pecking away at, and hopefully it will coalesce. You never know in these early stages what's going to happen. Yeah.
Well, I was challenged by a friend to when I was thrashing around earlier this year, wondering what to do, to write a memoir. So I've been doing that, like from World War II to COVID-19,
Ah,
with a
yeah,
few light incidents in between.
yeah.
And I'm also, well, maybe I'll just say this. I don't know what will happen with it, but I'm also playing with the idea of a sequel to Without Her.
Oh, what a great idea.
That takes up where that one ends.
I love that.
People who are left. I'm doing it, and I'm going to do it anyway, whether whether it works or not. But I'm going to
Oh,
see what
fabulous.
happens. So I'll
Yes.
stick right there because I do. They kept on talking to me. They wouldn't go away, and I kept hearing these voices in my head and thinking, there's more.
Oh my gosh. Now I have so many questions. I want to know. What will happen now? Will Claudia end up with Alexandra? What will, yeah, I know you can't tell, but
So questions, I have them too. Yeah.
I think that's a great sign that your book answers big questions, and it's satisfying. The ending is extremely satisfying, and it raises more questions.
Yeah, I think it has, and it took me a while, a year, to see that actually. I mean, that's not much, but then I thought, well, no, there are more questions here to be followed up.
Yes, yes, and I think there's a fine art to that actually. You want to create an ending, but you don't want to tie up too many threads. That becomes artificial in a way too.
Oh, it does. Yes. It's kind of annoying too, to the reader, I think.
Yeah.
Overdo it, the tidying up at the end. I've always wished that Tolstoy hadn't written about all the people in War and Peace in their domestic bliss afterwards.
Right? Yes.
You ended this wonderful book. I don't want to know if they're all sitting by their firesides, happily married,
Just back away, Tolstoy. Put down the pen.
But I did feel that every time I read that.
Yeah.
The question of what happens next is if it's alive in your head, I think you want to address it. So I'm doing that, taking the time to do that.
Fantastic. Let's see. There are more questions. Let's see. So someone is asking, I'm sorry, I haven't read the book yet, but I just ordered it. I'm looking forward to it. I read in your bio that you were poet laureate of Key West, which I love. What was involved in that? That's a great question. What was that like, being poet laureate?
Honor that sort of surprised me. I was only the second one, and the first one was somebody in his 90s who was really sort of a survivor of the Beat generation. And so I was really surprised to be nominated. And then I was told I really didn't have to do very much. I could rest on my laurels. So I didn't do very much, but I carried on writing poetry workshops, that sort of thing. I didn't have a massive impact on the community, I don't think. But it was almost like a sort of an honor. It was an honor. Yeah.
Oh, that's one. Did you get a crown or anything, or?
I got a plaque.
Oh, okay. I'm always looking for a tiara,
I didn't get well, the laurels, the actual laurels, but then they don't grow here anyway. So.
Oh, okay. That is a very cool thing, I think. Let's see. Can you tell us more about your writing process? What's your writing day like?
Well, as I was saying, I write in the mornings. I go to a studio, which is about 5 minutes walk from here, where I usually go. I take a bike, my trike actually, because then I've got this great big basket on the back I can put stuff in. And I rent a room from a friend who has a little house. She rents out rooms to artists and writers. And so I actually leave home to go and do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult. There's no internet and there's no phone. And I could take my phone, but I try and cut myself off from the world in there. And then I usually, these days, I don't usually do any more during the day until sort of later in the afternoon. I just look at what I did in the morning, and edit it.
Do you try for a certain number of pages or hours or?
Not really. Tend to be in it really when I'm writing. I'm really in it, and I just, I sort of think, oh my goodness, it's lunchtime. So I
That's
go
great.
home to my husband, and time has whizzed past without me really trying to make it do so.
That's wonderful.
Going well, yeah.
Yeah, you're in the flow when that happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just nice to have a room to go and kind of sit and think in. And I make notes. I have a big hardback book. I make notes about the novel or whatever I'm writing.
Fabulous. Yeah. I like that the collecting of thoughts, the collecting of ideas, I think is very helpful. I tell students to carry paper with them, to always have writing utensils.
Yes.
Be ready.
Yes, have a notebook. Yes, take it with you.
Yeah. I think of you as a very international writer. I mean, not just obviously, because of having lived in other countries, but, I feel like your writing, you talk about different cultures. You talk about what it means to be of a place and how it feels to find yourself in new places. And I wondered, are there certain places that are more inspiring to you? Are there certain places that sort of speak to you more, or that you can't write about?
Interesting that. I've written a lot about, a lot of my books are set in, or partly set in France, because I've spent a lot of time there. And I've actually done a lot of writing in Paris over the last 10, 12 years. So, that figures largely. And when I try and read in French when I'm there, and just see what, immerse myself in that culture. My early life was in England, and so I've gone back to that recently. Much more than I did when my first books came out 50 years ago, and they're set in England. I mean, the first one was set in England, and it's just actually being republished 50 years ago, which was amazing.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's available. It's published by a man called Mike Walmer, who has a small press. And it was amazing that he wanted to do it. So he's working on my early stuff, bringing it out now.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But the place I couldn't write about I have written about Scotland because I lived there for 12 years, and I wrote it in America, but my Coming George song, my heroine lives in Edinburgh.
Yes.
Half Scottish anyway. When I was there, I felt too intimidated because there were so many great Scottish writers. It was a time when being English was really sort of suspect. The Scottish National Party. It was not really a party, it was like a sort of gang.
Oh.
And I tended to be rather sort of discreet when I was there about writing about Scotland, because it felt like it was their province.
Interesting.
Yeah, I realized that later on. But then when I was in America, I thought, well, I've lived there 12 years and I love Scotland, and I lived in Edinburgh, and I want to set my heroine down in Edinburgh. And then I got a nice note from a Scottish friend saying, this is one of the best books I've read about Edinburgh. So, thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But
yes. Yeah. I read Becoming George Sands, and I thought you did an amazing job of working with that setting. To me, it felt very alive, very real. I've only been there for a very brief visit, so I have virtually nothing to go on. But to me, it spoke. And I feel like that with a lot of your settings. When you write about the south of France, you bring in the climate, you bring in the environment, you bring in the smells. The senses are involved, and they become active in the story in a wonderful way. So
place is very important to me, and
yes,
you can't make it up. You can't pretend to do it. I know
you
people
can't fake it.
You can't fake it. That's one of those sort of bedrocks, I think. Yeah.
I personally, I find that very valuable, and I feel like that is an exciting aspect of your writing. Now we have another question here. Are you happy with your life as you've lived it? Are you glad you've chosen writing as a profession? Ooh.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Wouldn't it be terrible if you said no?
No, absolutely. I'm very, yeah.
I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, I don't mean to beat the feminist horse. I guess that's just something that's really interesting to me. Women who write, because women who write are doing something subversive.
Yes.
You know, and so to ask that question about how you live your life, how it does it, do you feel like you've sat in it? Does it feel like a satisfying literary and personal life?
Absolutely. I can't imagine how people don't live who don't do it, actually. I mean, I would sometimes, I know artists of some sort. I know plenty of painters. I feel the same way about their work and so on. But no, it's been terrific. And I think the subversive angle is interesting because children who write are subversive too. You know, and I started writing really young because I wanted to really say stuff that wasn't going to be acceptable, I think. And I carried on doing it. And my first novel actually made both my parents and my parents-in-law at the time very upset.
Ah, did it?
Yes, but I didn't realize that I was doing it. But I felt like, you know, it was a subversive book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there it was, published, and they had to put up with it, and they didn't like it very much.
That's awesome.
So, you know, I hadn't thought that would happen. I don't know if it's happened to you, that you feel like, okay, I'm being very transgressive here, and you realize afterwards.
You almost don't realize it until the book comes out,
That's right.
and then there's fallout.
You've been sitting alone in your room, it's just your thoughts, you know, and you think, oh, this is kind of normal. This is how I've, you know, and then it's suddenly out there, and people are going, oh, you can't say that, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. They've all identified with a rather kind of pathetic woman who didn't resemble either of them, I thought.
People do that, which is very freeing when you realize that you are going to be in trouble no matter what you write and no matter what ideas you have. You may as well just speak your truth because, you know, you're already in trouble.
Yes, you started in, yes. You're not going to do anything if you're afraid of
Right.
too much. Yeah.
I wonder if, you know, having that boarding school experience was important to becoming a writer, you know, being suppressed in that way, putting that pressure on you.
Could be. I've never thought of that. You know, yes, like prison really helps. Really helps.
Yes.
Yes.
Right? Being told to behave, being told to be good.
Yes, definitely. And I think the subversive element that Hannah and Claudia have comes out in the book. But Hannah's the one who actually gets it together to run away, and she runs away twice.
Yes.
So is too law-abiding and scared to do it.
Yeah.
So, you know, her habits of running away from things have started at a very young age. She's brought back and punished.
Yes. Eventually, she becomes an artist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the time, she does.
Then the filmmaking thing too. I mean, I researched this after a bit, and I talked to a friend of mine who was in California making film at the time, and she said, you know, there were hardly any women filmmakers in the United States at that time. And I got the ones, and there were some in Europe, but. So my character, Claudia, I mean, she was being subversive in wanting to make film. She didn't want to, you know, she wanted to be a director. And when she got there, everyone said, well, you've got to learn, you know, learn the hard way like everybody else. You can't just walk in and be a director.
Right, right.
But she made it. I mean, she did it. She didn't do it very sort of, she didn't become world famous or anything, but she did it to her satisfaction. And I've always been fascinated by films, so that's why I wanted to give her that job.
I wondered about that. Yeah. So is film a big, does film influence your writing?
Yes, it really does, I think. I mean, there's some movies I'm absolutely passionate about and watch over and over again if I get the chance. And I think when I'm writing, it's like seeing a film. You know, I sort of see it happening in front of my eyes.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I feel like there's
you know,
something very cinematic about your work.
and so I feel like I'm sort of writing what I see on here.
Okay.
And I've just had this thought. I wonder what, if you know, before cinema, whether writers actually thought about that,
Mm.
how much our minds have been influenced by cinema. But no, I've always, well, since I was a student, fell in among a bunch of people who spent their entire time going to see films. So I, you know, didn't do too well in our exams, but
Right. Right.
and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I still do.
Are there still, yeah, I was going to ask, you know, I mean, you talk about the, I guess, neo-expressionists, neo-realists, you know, the French, the English, the Italians. Are there American filmmakers? Are there contemporary filmmakers who you find stimulating, exciting?
Oh yes, but you know, I didn't know much about American cinema until I came to live here. You know, I didn't. What we saw when we were children was cowboys. You know, we went to and we all played our games with American accents.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
the cinema, you know. But no, I think there's some amazing Robert Altman, for example. You know, Coppola. I mean, and Sofia Coppola too. I mean, there's some amazing,
Yes.
good, of course, American filmmakers, and you know, and small scale ones too. So I'm frustrated at the moment about not being able to go to the cinema, but I'm very happy to.
So I wanted to break in here and talk about the French New Wave and the fact that everyone, all of those filmmakers were writers and critics before they became filmmakers.
Yes.
And they actually broke all the rules, had no idea what they were doing, and invented an entirely new language.
Yeah.
So the Nouvelle Vague, you know?
So
Jump cuts and music and everything else. So, but they were writers. So
yeah.
they were mostly approaching it academically.
And in earlier films too, people talked a lot more than
Yes.
they do.
Yes.
They
And
have
there are stories.
yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to thank you both for a delicious conversation and say, Diana, you've quoted the very Brackenberry. I think we're gonna keep that. I mean, that's
Right?
amazing, right? Very
It is.
Brackenberry.
Very Brackenberry. Yes. Yes.
And I encourage all of you to order Without Her from Books and Books in Coral Gables or Key West, whatever is your preference. And I wish we could move into the next room and start the autographing. And we will someday soon. We will. But
Yes.
I wanted to thank you for joining us this evening, for being with us for this wonderful conversation. And I hope that I will see you both very soon and in person. And until then, stay safe, keep writing, keep doing what you do so well. And thank you for being part of Books and Books and our little virtual bookshop and virtual universe.
Yeah. It's a great pleasure. This was so much fun. Thank you, Roz.
Yeah, Diana, they were lovely questions, and thank you. I really so much enjoyed talking with you.
Oh, it's, you know, yeah, we should all just go get coffee now.
Maybe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina.
Stay safe and well.
You too.